Today's session focuses on understanding how EDOF optics and, in particular, the new J&J Pure C IOL are shaping our approach to visual rehabilitation and patient satisfaction. Over the next 2 hours, we will explore the optical principles and performance of EDOF technology, the design and early outcomes of Pure C lens, and the practical considerations in patient selection and counseling. We also have an interesting debate and a quiz. I'd like to welcome our distinguished invited speaker, Dr. Arul Murray Varman. Dr. Arul has a vast clinical experience of more than 40 years in cataract surgery, and he's also the managing director of Uma Eye Clinic and has been the immediate past president of TNOA. So let's look forward to a stimulating and interactive scientific discussion that deepens our understanding on this exciting topic of EDOF. Thank you.
Now I invite Dr. Shikha Basi and Dr. Kunjal Gala, Fellow Pediatric Ophthalmology, to talk on evolution of EDOF optics from concept to clinical reality.
So let's begin the cataract update with this talk, which will look at the evolution of EDOF optics, how the EDOF has developed from just a concept and it's shaping our clinical practice. We are going to look at the principles of EDOF. We are going to compare the performance with monofocal and multifocal IOLs in terms of objective metrics like MTF, OTF, and PSF. So the monofocal IOLs remain the most commonly implanted IOLs globally because their optical principle is simple. They provide the best vision at one focal point, usually for distance. They've been giving consistent, measurable outcomes without much photic phenomena. Usually patients don't complain of glare or halos. But in today's world, monofocals leave a gap. They don't provide comfortable near vision. Hence, the multifocals came into the picture. The optical principle of multifocals is that they create multiple focal points through diffractive or refractive zones, helping patients to see at distance, intermediate, and near. But it's important to do the surgery properly. Critical centration is important because if there is no critical centration, the patient can develop disturbing lower and higher order aberrations, compromising on the visual quality. And dysphotopsia is inherent to this IOL design. Multifocal cannot be dysphotopsia. They reduce the contrast sensitivity and can significantly impair optical quality and overall patient satisfaction, particularly in low light conditions. Having said that, there is a growing need for intermediate vision. We all know that the screen time these days is 7 to 8 hours. Computers typically at 50 to 60 centimeters. Most of our daily activities like shopping, eating, dashboard control, desk organization, all that is at this intermediate distance range. So that led to the search for an IOL that could give us an intermediate vision without the disadvantage of multifocal, but with all the advantages of monofocal. Now we can say that monofocal plus is the beginning of that solution. It is kind of bridging the gap. It gives us an excellent far point performance comparable to monofocal IOLs, while it's extending the depth of field to include the intermediate distances. It doesn't have photic phenomena like multifocals. So what exactly makes an EDOF different? So let's look at the optical principles involved in EDOF and what actually defines an EDOF. So an EDOF gives us a continuous range of clear focus rather than distinct focal points, utilizing negative spherical aberration, pinhole effect, diffractive or refractive designs, and it's been shown that it significantly improves the uncorrected distance, intermediate, and near visual acuities compared to a monofocal. And if you want to have the exact definition of an EDOF, American Academy has given the exact definition that says that the best corrected visual acuity should be comparable to the monofocal control and should have superior distance corrected intermediate visual acuity. The defocus curve should show 0.2 logmar. It should be better by 0.2 logmar at 66 centimeters in 50% of the patients. Now, once in a while, we all get a patient who wants to get the best from the technology. Patient has a lot of questions. Most of the time, we say, we'll put a lens, you'll have a good distance vision, and for near, you'll have to wear the glasses. Many a times, the patient, elderly gentleman, not too educated, says okay and goes. But once in a while, we get a patient, and depending on your practice, you can get very often this kind of patient who want to really get the best from the technology. And to deliver that best to the patient, one must know the optical quality metrics, not going by the marketing terms, but scientifically, you should evaluate the lens on the optical quality metrics in terms of OTF, MTF, PSF, and how these help us they help us objectively compare the different EDOF or, for that matter, any other IOL. To learn all that, I invite Dr. Kunjal Gala to tell us more about these.
So these optical metrics are basically measured in something called as an optical bench study. It is an in vitro laboratory study which helps us measure how a lens or an optical system is going to form images of light. There are different parameters such as MTF or modulation transfer function, optical transfer function OTF, point spread function PSF, which are measured. So we'll just see what they are and what can we infer from them. So optical transfer function, as the name suggests, it's basically how an optical system is transferring the contrast and detail from the object to the image. So here, this is a very comprehensive mathematical description of the optical system performance. So the importance of this is that it is helping us provide a more comprehensive assessment of how an optical system is functioning beyond the visual acuity. We are talking about contrast loss from scattering and the phase distortions which occur from optical aberrations, and it gives us a more comprehensive outlook. Then we come to modulation transfer function. So this basically deals with just the contrast or the amplitude part of the OTF. It's basically talking about how rich is a patient's vision going to be after implanting a particular IOL. And when we talk about OTF or when we talk about MTF, we always talk in terms of spatial frequencies. So what are spatial frequencies? Higher spatial frequencies represent finer details or sharpness, something which we probably need for reading smaller or finer prints. Whereas low spatial frequencies are where we are focusing on coarse features. So whenever we talk about MTF or OTF, we are going to be doing a frequency-based analysis in which we try and correlate these values with spatial frequencies.
MTF slope.
So MTF slope, so how steep is an MTF slope is going to tell us whether there's going to be a rapid deterioration of vision, whereas if there's a gradual decline, that shows that there is a much better performance of that IOL. Then we talk about the point spread function. So as the name suggests, it basically talks about how a point of light is going to be spread, or what is going to be the two-dimensional distribution of the light intensity in the image plane. So this is basically the inverse Fourier transformation of OTF, and it is giving us a direct visualization of the optical quality. So as you can see in the image, narrower and more concentrated the PSF, that means it's a higher superior optical performance, whereas broader PSF signifies aberrations or scattering of light. And lastly, we talk about Strahl's ratio. So Strahl's ratio is quantifying how close an optical system's performance is. It is basically a ratio of the peak intensity of the aberrated PSF to the ideal PSF. It has various values. So a Strahl's ratio of more than 8 signifies excellent performance, whereas less than 0.3 signifies poor performance. A higher ratio invariably indicates a better optical quality and contrast reproduction. So now this we know this, why don't we try and apply these values in a few studies and understand what inference can we draw from them?
No, so now we are here to discuss the outcomes of pure C IOL, and literature search showed a couple of studies, out of which 2 studies I've taken out. This is the first study that is comparing these 4 lenses by J&J, the Technis, Symphony, Eyehance, and Pure C. So now that Kunjal has told us how to, look at these graphs, now this is a graph showing the through focus modulation transfer function. Kunjal, you didn't tell us about through focus modulation.
So we know what is modulation transfer function. The word through focus basically means we are trying to understand the MTF through various values of defocus. That means at different distances, that is distance, intermediate, and near vision.
So now you can see here, thank you, Kunjal. So you can see here, the yellow is the Technis. Below that, blue color is the Eyehance performance, and red is the Pure C, and the green one is the Symphony IOL. Now, can anyone tell me, this is at the 3 millimeter aperture, and this is at the 4 millimeter aperture. Anything that is standing out in all 3? This is now, when we say MTF at 25, Kunjal has told us this 25 is the spatial frequency. 25 is what, Kunjal?
So 25 indicates a lower spatial frequency. So basically, we are talking about the vision for coarser details.
So and here it's 100. So this is for finer details. So these are all the IOLs performing for coarse and then fine and intermediate spatial frequencies. So anybody can tell me what is standing out here in these 3 graphs? Anybody wants to take a... So you all can see that which particular lens is giving the best MTF in all the 3. This is called the peak performance, Peak performance at 0, this yellow, peak performance at 0, this lens, 0. So Technis is giving, at all the spatial frequencies, Technis is giving the best MTF value. If you look here, the Eyehance is just, so monofocal plus is just below the Technis for the lower frequency, spatial frequency. But if you look at the finer frequency, there is a difference between a Technis and an Eyehance, both for intermediate and fine frequencies. So that is the first point that your monofocals, standard monofocals, they gave the best results. The second thing is that Eyehance and Pure C demonstrated wider through focus range than Technis. Now, Kunjal told us if any graph falls steeply, then it's not a good performance, that suddenly the visual quality is going to deteriorate. Whereas if you compare the EDOFs, only the first 2 are monofocal, the other 2 are accepted as EDOFs. So they have a very graduated fall of the MTF. Next is, you can see that Symphony has 2 peaks here. So it's almost behaving like a bifocal. So the second peak is at minus 1.5. So it is giving us a good distance and then good intermediate vision, but it does not have that typical, wider graph. There are just 2 peaks there. There is a secondary peak. And here you can see that though at 0.5 and minus 0.5 and minus 1, Eyehance is better than Pure C, but for nearer work, probably Pure C is giving better performance than the Eyehance. Now, what happens when the pupil is dilated? This was for a 3 millimeter pupil. So anybody here can tell me what's happening in a dilated pupil? So in a dilated pupil, there's not much difference between the Eyehance and Technis. You can see it's almost same. It doesn't make a difference whether you're putting an Eyehance or a Technis. But what is standing out is that Symphony continues to give good intermediate vision despite the pupillary dilatation. And these 2 lenses, the Pure C and the eye hands, they just don't add any value. So if anybody wants, uh, if you're putting an eye hands in a dilated pupil thinking that it's going to give some added advantage of reading, no, it's not going to work. What is weighted OTF? You didn't tell me about weighted OTF.
So we spoke about OTF, which basically talks about the contrast and the details. So the human eye has a specific preference. So we perceive few spatial frequencies much better than the other spatial frequencies. So when we weigh in this factor literally, that is when we get weighted OTF.
So when we compare all four lenses, here what they have given is, this is the OTF here, but here is the visual acuity. So you can see that for far objects, visual acuity is 6.6. This is what all are, above 6.6. Whether it's a dilated pupil or it's a small pupil, everybody is giving more than 6.6. All four lenses. But what does it actually mean? For if you look at the OTF, not the visual acuity, look at the OTF. Techness is definitely better than symphony, and that difference reduces in a dilated pupil. The second thing that this graph is showing, that the visual acuity part of pure C for near vision, it stands out on this, in this chart, that despite dilatation, it seems to be doing better than, when we had seen the MTF graph, it was saying something different. But if you look at the visual acuity, you can prove it that pure C is, better than eye hands and at places symphony too. Now, this is looking at very small pupils. So something very interesting here, if anybody can point out, that in 2 millimeter and 2.5 millimeter pupils, what is happening is, look at the peak performance of eye hands and pure C. The peak performance is shifting towards myopia. So when the pupil is 2 millimeter, 2.5, all other places, it's at 0, the peak performance. This is called the peak performance. It's at 3 millimeter pupil here. But if you see at 2 millimeter, the peak performance is, so there is a myopic shift for the peak performance for eye hands than pure C. And symphony continues to maintain, it delivers at all pupillary sizes. So what it's showing is symphony is kind of pupillary size independent. That's what is seen. And these two lenses, eye hands and pure C, don't deliver if the pupil is large. What is USA force resolution target? So when this kind of image is given, what does it tell?
So basically, these are targets which are used to simulate vision or simulate image of what will be seen through a particular IOL.
And you can see that the kind of image that the patient has at these distances, it's self-explanatory. So now let's compare the last study. Vivity and Pure C are the two EDOFs which have come lately. And there is a study which is comparing the results of the two. And this is the MTF analysis. And what is standing out here is that both are equally good for far, but for intermediate, probably Vivity is better, and for near, probably Pure C is better. That's what this study is saying. And increasing the pupillary aperture decreases the quality of both these lenses. And the same can be seen here in these charts, that for distance, the visual acuity of both the lenses is good for 3 and 4.5 millimeter pupil. But if you look at the near, both are bad. They don't give anything if the pupils are dilated. Okay. What about misalignment? The study says this is a misaligned. The black line is a misaligned IOL, and it seems the Pure C is a little more forgiving compared to Vivity, and at a dilated pupil, both are bad. And same thing, tilt. Tilt is more forgiving, but dilated pupil, nothing works. So the take-home messages.
So first and most important is we need to understand these functions so that we can look beyond branding and marketing claims. We need to understand how this optical bench study helps us differentiate from the differentiate the genuine optical performance from what has been told. And also, most importantly, understanding how each IOL works will help us tailor IOL choice to a patient's lifestyle And obviously, it helps us maintain scientific neutrality when we understand these metrics and then decide the optical merit of a particular intraocular lens.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Kunjal. I now request Dr. Arunmali Varman, sir, to enlighten us on the PureC IOL.
Thank you and good evening. Outside, let me thank Shankar Nethralaya and the team for inviting me to be here. I did learn quite a bit on what was presented now. So I stick to mostly clinical stuff and less to all these basic science optics, but they are mixed up, definitely. MTF can be used for both finding out contrast sensitivity as well as the ability of a lens to focus at different distances. So EDOF IOLs, what do they mean? That's a name that is kind of misused very badly because lenses keep coming up every 6 months to 1 year. Earlier, you would have to wait 3 to 5 years for a new lens to come out with optical bench availability and software that can design a lens completely on the computer, and then it can, with high fidelity, reproduce it on manufacturing and bring it out. You find lenses coming out very fast. So the word EDOF has been kind of misused. Eyehance is probably the first lens which was considered EDOF, but J&J themselves consider it advanced monofocal, and they don't use the word EDOF anymore. They probably now use the EDOF word for Symphony as well as for PureC. On Symphony, the word EDOF is actually a misnomer because any lens with rings is not an EDOF. It splits up light and then that can't be an EDOF. If you take it that way, a Synergy or a PanOptix Pro that's coming up are all have got the rings, and on top of the rings, they put in the EDOF. So they try to get the best of both worlds. Why do you do that? Because each one of them got something to deliver, and you're trying to get both together. That means each one of them are not delivering 100% of what you want or what the patient wants. So let's take that as introduction and keep going. So what is the whole aim of IOLs? It's emetropia. That's what we're looking at. But we started looking at emetropia seriously only when we started putting in multifocal IOLs. Until then, we're not very bothered if somebody had a 0.5, 0.75, a cylinder of 0.75 or so. We couldn't care less because anyway he's going to wear glasses and the patient has got high quality vision, so on and so forth. But the moment we started putting multifocal IOLs, if a patient had a 0.75 off, plus or minus, both his distant vision and near vision is gone. And that person is paid through his nose and he's going to eat your head, take you to task and be very unhappy. And that is when we started looking at the whole concept of emetropia. So unless your concept of emetropia is strong and clinically you're going to get at least 92% of your regular monofocals within 0.5, please don't comment about multifocals. Get that in the kitty. You should be perfectly in line, at least 85%, if not 92%. That's reachable by any one of us with all the equipment that we have. It is the application of mind and training your staff to achieve that, calculating each time you go wrong, what went wrong, doing a postmortem, doing a court-martial on that. And if I have anybody who's 0.75 off, the whole thing is worked up for hours till we know where did we go wrong, what was the calculation that missed out. You do that, then all your multifocals start falling into place. Then you start addressing the problems of multifocals truly. So most often we have mixed it up and addressing both the ametropia that has been induced by our calculations and the dissatisfaction of the patient by the design of the multifocal itself and putting it all together in one basket. Unless this is completely segregated, we will not understand the working of a multifocal and how to get the best out of it. So emetropia is for an ideal IOL, emetropia, then again you want clear vision over all distances, good contrast sensitivity, and we don't want photic phenomena. So this is something I want to put up to show here. This is a patient I had operated upon about 25 years ago who had axial length of some 34, 35 millimeters. At that time, she was probably 18 or 19 years old. And she had huge myopia. And of course, those days, we did not have ICLs of that range. The highest ICL those days was, I think, 18 or something. And I had to do an ICL and do a LASIK on top of that, so bioptics. So she comes now. These people who got high myopia develop cataract earlier, nucleus closes in one eye. And then you have this thing where you have to look at your A scans. Then you have to look at the calculation software, what you're going to do. And now the IOL master is reading through and reading the depth of the anterior chamber on the ICL, not on the crystalline lens. So if you're going to be off there, then you're going to be off. So you have to apply everything, go do multiple calculations, go use a different ASOCT, take the cursor, get the depth calculated, and then which software to use. I think Kane works very well on post-LASIK, slightly better than Barrett Universal 2 post-LASIK. That also works very well, but I find Kane is very good. So after all this lady, the other eye is still got no cataract. She's fine, but she's now in her late 40s, 50s, and needs a reading glass. And then once I did, before doing the first eye, where the vision was bad because of cataract, she said, I won't do the other eye now. Gets it done. 2 days later, comes back and says, do the other eye. Because we got it on the dot. Her refraction was less than 0.5. There I put in a trifocal. In this kind of range, -1, you get only the Zeiss trifocal is available. She's very happy. She's not bothered about the glare and halo. She's brilliant vision. So she wants to get rid of even the reading glass in the other eye. If it was off, I'm going to have a patient that's extremely unhappy. So why I'm showing this off is that in a difficult situation, you should be able to get it bang on. And that is when you'll be able to get it bang on every single one of your patients. That's the first take-home lesson. Please get your biometry act together, and that should be exceedingly accurate and perfect. See, photic phenomena can be positive and negative. So the day that you start getting more and more of your patients as absolute emetropia, more of them are going to come and complain about negative dysphotopsia. Very funny. When they have a refractive error, they don't notice the shadow on the side. The moment they have no refractive error, believe me, my worst complaints now is negative dysphotopsia. Gets on my nerves. I have patients coming back 6 months later. Ever since you operated, I'm having irritation on this side. You do irritation, you keep checking, putting in the dye, looking at the dryness, nothing, okay, I operated on the temporal side. Is there a epithelial heaping? You sit down and ask a proper history. அது ஒரு மாதிரியா இருக்கு, ஆயிலியா இருக்கு, ஒரு மாதிரியா இருக்கு. And some of them can become very, very upset about this shadow, and they get very, very irritated. And there are people who go semi-suicidal. I had one patient of that kind. Oh boy, I don't want to talk about that. Okay, where did this come from? Okay, why did Kane formula come into this again? Okay, we need to understand before we go into EDOFs the concept of spherical aberrations. This is one IOL design where this is from the Apasami, the Swiss phobe, which is also an EDOF, which works very well. And at least they are one group who accept that they are putting in more aberration in the center. I've been still waiting for a message from the manufacturer. I've called him in the car. I'm telling him, I look at it, get back to you. It's the K value is changed in the center 1.5 millimeters. I do, what do you exactly do? Do you put spherical aberration? No. We put high rod aberrations. Now, what on earth exactly are you putting in there? I'll get back to you, sir. I'm still waiting. So that's a catch. Dr. Prema was asking me, the companies don't tell you exactly what they do. I don't know why they don't, but I will get it from Apasami, not an issue. So at the central 1.5 millimeter zone, they put in a small little change in the optics, which increases the spherical aberrations if you want to dumb it down to very low levels of understanding. What they exactly do is a little different from one company to another. Most of them don't tell you we add aberrations there, but yes, they are, which I found out by doing the eye trace. So what do you have to say about spherical aberrations? All of us have spherical aberrations. They are there. And as we age, it gets better. It's a kind of a mechanism that counteracts for presbyopia, and that actually works better, so you can kind of push presbyopia if you have good spherical aberrations on your cornea or in your lens. So this is what is used in Presbeyond to give you freedom from glasses for reading. I've had Presbeyond done for myself. I'm 6'6", and that it does work. So the idea of understanding that spherical aberrations do definitely work is in Presbeyond. What it does is takes a dominant eye, makes it plano, but adds spherical aberrations so that the plano eye in a 67-year-old person makes you read N10. That's impossible, no? On a plano eye. N10, maybe sometimes N8 parts. I'm going to redo it because I think I'll get N8. I'm going to go for a redo anyhow. About 20% of your Presbeyond patients will need a redo. Takes a non-dominant eye, makes it 1.5 minus. The 1.5 minus on a 67-year-old, it shouldn't give you any good vision for distance or near, but makes you near N5 and makes your distance 612. So that's the beauty of playing with spherical aberrations. It does not only play with the power, it plays with spherical aberrations in the center, and if you can do that on the cornea, you can do it better fidelity on the lenses. That's exactly what they're doing. So this is just simple. So how spherical aberration works is just like the Stump's conoid. You're just elongating the whole thing. And it's slightly different if you try to play with the aberrations. They claim it's not spherical. They use something else. The K value is changed. Let's figure out as we go on. So I will not go into this. It can work both ways. Spherical aberration, negative and positive, can give you better depth of focus. But that is there. And it has to be within the therapeutic range. Both plus and minus spherical aberrations of less than 0.6 microns or maximum 0.8 are good. You cross 0.8 either way, then they start to go haywire, your quality of vision drops. So that is where you have to get the act together. So that is what these lenses are trying to do. That's what Presbyon does. So Technis Pure C, what they have done is the anterior surface is just a monofocal with asphericity. It is not a spherical surface. The posterior, they claim there's added power. Your MTF curves showed depth of focus till 1.75, very, very good, up to 2, maybe even 2.25. Now, if you're going to add plus 2 or 1.75 power from periphery to center, your distant vision has to drop tremendously. It doesn't, because it's not just added power. Definitely not. Yes, there's a difference between what is in the periphery to the center, but again, they are playing around with higher order aberrations or spherical aberrations or whatever, and that increases your depth of field. So the catch now is, how is it going to work on a cornea which has got certain amount of aberrations already? That's the catch. So what I'm trying to do, I put in about 130 of these lenses, and Appasami's lens I put over 200, 250. We're trying to work out on patients to see the ones that do well, looking at the corneal spherical aberrations, and after we put the lens in, you can use the eye trace to see the aberrations in the cornea, you can look at the aberrations on the lens and the total eye, and trying to figure out, will a person with a particular corneal spherical aberration be more suitable for the EDOF IOLs vis-a-vis somebody else? So we can predict that this person will get excellent quality of vision. It's going to take some time. With my small numbers, it's going to take quite some time. We're working on it just now. So that's it. We'll just skip to all of this. This is nothing great. So pure C by modulating spherical aberrations in the central area of the IOL, the depth of field is increased. Depth of focus is increased. Simple as that. And this is where the graphs come in. So what we looked at there was MTF curves and the adjusted MTF curves and so on. You look at the pure clinical one would be the defocus curve. A defocus curve will give you the idea. Ideal defocus curve will be one that is flat. It's right up there, stays right across until 2.5 at least, and drops down. Well, that doesn't exist, but something that's almost flat across would be from a lens that's got a dual optical principle like Synergy or Panoptics Plus or Pro that's coming in, or Galaxy or one of these lenses which have both. They're almost flat. You can't call flat. You'll see a kind of a wavy and drops off. But the tail drops off around 2.53. If you have a power of 2.5, that's good enough. You can see near very well at a decent distance, and you'll have excellent quality of vision for intermediate because it is also addressing the intermediate range. So defocus curve plays an important role for you to actually understand the performance of a lens. So how does one do it? Finish your surgeries, wait for 3 weeks, 4 weeks or whatever, then refract the person, irrespective of whether he reads 6.6 or not, that doesn't matter. Even if you're reading 6.6, 6.5, refract, and you will find a small refractive error left over, 0.25, 0.5, something. Put in that. That is the 0 point. From there, you go positive, plus 0.5, plus 1, to see what's the defocus. How many lines does he read? That's the defocus. Then come on to minus 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.53. So that will give you a graph that if the tail is lifted, you're going to get excellent near vision. If the camel hump is good, intermediate distance is good, intermediate is good. So most of these lenses give you a good camel hump, but the tail is sloping down. The one that gets the tail lifted up is going to be the ultimate lens that we're going to be looking forward to. And that's going to be absolutely flat. So it's not very far away with design possibilities that are there with the new technologies. I don't think we need to wait more than a couple of years to give you a lens which will deliver everything. So coming back here, in the Appasamy Swiss Phobe lens, they put the asphericity on the posterior and whatever they played with in the anterior part. That's the only difference. And at least they accept what they're doing. And then this is exactly their MTF curves, which shows in a 20 diopter lens, there is focus right up to 23. So that means you're getting almost about 2.5 diopters of a defocus. That means that's the kind of focus you get depth of field. And this works. You'll find again in EDOF lenses, bilaterally implanted patients will be more happy because you're never going to get N6 crisp. Though most patients would read N6, it will be an N6 that is parts or N8. But bilaterally implanted N6 would be crisp at a decent distance and bright light again. Again, your underlying thing, when you go for this pure EDOFs, be aware that you have to tell the patient to use reasonably bright light to read, small print. If they're going to read in dull light, it's not going to be very clear. They can't do that. Whether you can do that with Synergy or Panoptics, but you can't do that with the EDOF lenses. Slightly brighter light and they're good. They have no issues. But again, every one of these patients will tell you that the near crispness is not very good. That means it's to do with the effect of how the brain perceives aberrations. Even after I had my presbyon done for some time, I can see clearly, I can read N5 quite comfortably, but the outline I would feel wasn't as crisp as it should be. So that means the brain is looking or perceiving the spherical aberrations in a different way so that you are perceiving a different quality of vision. Doesn't mean the quality has gone down. It's a different quality so that after some time you get used to it or you adapt to it. So there would be definitely patients who would say that their near is not as crisp as before, but if you test them on your reading chart, they'll be reading N6 comfortably. And particularly bright light, probably take it an inch away, they'll read even N5 binocularly. So we look at some of the results. This is 1 month post-op uncorrected distant vision. So if your refraction, your biometry is good, there's nothing to be talked about. Intermediate is always very good. Absolutely brilliant. You look at computer distance, they are absolutely brilliant. But all of these are binocular visions that I'm going to tell you that because all of these till we come to the last chart, which is the uniocular. You'll find the clear difference there. And near is also very good, uncorrected, binocular again. But when you go uniocular, this is how you see it. So you'll find people who read N6 are reading N6 in bright light, maybe an inch or two further away than the usual distance they're used to. And most of them, of course, will read N6, N8 or better. There's nobody who would read poorer than N8, as long as you have done your biometry right, or you're going to do this with the full correction put in for whatever distance correction that came in. So when you look at the performance of the lenses on the quality of vision, or rather the quantity of vision, it's acceptable to the patient because you're trading off the issues of photic phenomena. So I'll come to last why I like these lenses or why I use them in larger numbers now than I was doing a few months ago. That's the clinical part of it or the patient satisfaction part of it. But this does deliver as promised. So we look at contrast sensitivity, probably the most important to look at for quality of vision. So we can look at the MTF curves. You can implant the lens in the eye and then you do the MTF curve for these lenses on the eye trace. And these are actually as good as monofocals with the normal resting pupil size. Another way to do it, of course, is to put this person on the CVS 1000 and they do very well. That means the contrast sensitivity is really very good. There's no issue with contrast sensitivity. This is the defocus curve. You see that the hump goes up there and the tail drops off fast. If the tail lifts up, we go to be in really satisfactory near vision levels. This is the defocus, or rather the depth of focus, which you can calculate using the eye trace after implanting the lens in a patient's eye. If you had put in a monofocal, you'll find this nice peak out there. Central, huge peak right up there. It's narrow. Look at the width of this. You're getting a focus of almost 2.5 to at least 1.75 to 2, which is brilliant. And it is forgiving on the plus side. So if you're erring on plus 0.5, you still don't have a patient who will complain about distant vision, drop in vision. Not too bad. So you go plus or minus 0.5, it's kind of forgiving still because of the depth of field, depth of focus that is present. And these are not from the optical bench. This is from a lens implanted in a patient's eye. One eye and the other eye. So this is absolutely flat, one end to another. So we'll come to just implantation of the lens. There's nothing much. The POC looks and feels just like the technique is monofocal, but you look very carefully and tilt the microscope in the patient's head a little bit, you will find there's a small central bump. You can see that, but here it doesn't show up here. So it's just that it looks, just to show it's just like a monofocal lens. So we'll skip that part. So now what does PureC give you? No positive dysphotopsia. It's equivalent to a monofocal lens. A good contrast sensitivity, good intermediate vision, acceptable near vision, reasonably good when particularly implanted bilaterally. I'll use the word reasonably good. Now, why would the patient accept this? Because you're giving that patient a choice up front. You want excellent near vision? Yes, I will give you synergy or panoptics. But don't ask me if you see glare and halos. You don't want that, I'm going to give you this. You will be absolutely brilliant. You can read your newspapers when you hold it out there. Computer is good. But if you're going to read a small print close up, you may need to wear +1. They need only +1 at the most. So that means I have my patient primed, told, and he's accepted. So a person who's chosen synergy is not going to come and eat my head because he's seeing glare and halos. Because he's been told and given a choice. He's taken it, he or she. And the same applies to PureC. So all my headaches have disappeared overnight. So as long as I get my biometry right, my patients are not going to come and complain. So if the person comes and says, sir, I'm finding a little difficulty reading some of the things, and the most common will be somebody who's into finance and he wants to read that Economic Times, which is pink in color and small print, put 1+1. So he doesn't come and crib. I paid you 1.3 lakhs and what the hell is going on? So he's been told. So that's what in practice and clinical usage has been a big boon. Separate it out, you choose that, you get it, you choose this, you get this. So now, are we there as anything more? I'll digress a little in the next few slides. So this is so-called multifocal eye world or a segmental eye world that's come. It's been around. This design is nothing new. It's been around in Europe for some time. I don't know why it's not very popular. It looks just like a progressive bifocal. And you implant it, amazing. Distance, intermediate, near is brilliant. No issues, no photic phenomena, no nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is a lens designed and manufactured in India by our own ophthalmologist group from Bombay. Dr. R.C. Shah, I don't know, some of you may know, he and his friends, they are into all kind of innovations. This is a lens they're marketing for quite some time now. Earlier it used to be hydrophilic acrylic. I put in probably about 20 or 30 of those, and I've tried the hydrophobic acrylic, work very well. These lenses are more like progressive bifocals. They have to be implanted horizontally. You put them anywhere around, it's not going to work. So it has to be horizontal, and that is why he has made those, the loops have got those serrations so that it will not rotate. They work brilliantly. Again, I don't know why it's not able to market it, poor marketing. While this lens, though it has a segment, you can put it anywhere you want, and it still works. Kind of makes no sense whatsoever. Absolutely no sense whatsoever. They haven't yet come out with a toric platform yet, but they are. They are in India, they've got a dealer, but they're not marketing in a big way. They're doing very well in Europe and China. They're selling hand over fist in China. So this is the lens. Why is this video not coming on? There it is, it's come on. This looks just like any other plate haptic. I always like to put it horizontally, but you can put it any way you want. Sorry, put it vertically. Just goes in. You can see that segmentation there quite well. Works very well. So segmental eye worlds give excellent high quality vision over all distances. Note photic phenomena very well. It gives you excellent near vision and intermediate. I haven't done very big numbers. They're all in the sub 15. So I can't really comment on the long term or whether the performance is going to be uniform. But whatever I have done is very good. But still, it leaves you with a negative dysphotopsia. What do you do for that? So that's going to be an issue again. So these patients come back and that gets to be really annoying. So you have this This lens has been around for quite some time. This is a company that makes Femtis and a similar looking lens called Lentis. Lentis is similar to the other Clearview I showed you, segmental IOL. Again, this can be implanted anywhere. It comes both in the regular as well as the toric version. You can put it anywhere you want. If you looked at the lens, you find there's a tab out there. One tab there, one tab here. This loop goes behind the rexus. This tab comes in front of the rexus. This small tab comes in front of the rexus. There's a groove all around where the rexus goes and fits in snugly. So you have to have a 5 or 5.25 millimeter rexus. So in essence, you have to do a femto. You try anything else, it may become smaller and bigger. And then you stick it in there so it stays put there. And it doesn't rotate, so its stability is good. And funnily, you turn it anywhere around, it still works. Doesn't make any sense. They still don't explain how it works, but very interesting lens. This I put in only about 10 so far. This is my 10th lens, which I implanted, I think, yesterday. For the other eye of the patient, and both eyes is 6.6 and 6, very clear, and this person is, so that's a femto rexus. You put the lens in, this is incidentally toric also. You can see the toric mark, rotate it. Then you go into the bag and evacuate the bag of the viscoelastic, because you don't want to leave the whole viscoelastic inside. Evacuate it out fully. Then you put in a little bit viscoelastic anteriorly. Get it grossly aligned, visco anteriorly so it doesn't go behind into the bag. Now you start to get those clips into place. Not very difficult. The first clip alone is the most difficult. Once you get that, rest of it, it's come up over the rexus. Then the next one is easy. The other two become quite easy. That's two. Then you can see the rexus margin, get the smaller ones also aligned, then rotate it into position, it stays put. Remember when you go back and take the viscoelastic out to bring the height of the bottle down, because you go in with great force, the lens goes back into the bag. Then you can bring it up again. So I learned it the hard way. So it's great. These lenses also work very well, brilliant. So, but a little expensive, and also adds the cost of the femto. So fine, we'll skip that. So femtis, the other one is lentis, which is again a plate haptic. So that means negative photopsia is probably possible. So we'll have to wait and see. And does it take everything out? No. Femtis also has one very funny dysphotopsia known as the angel wing dysphotopsia. Because if the rexus is not centered perfectly or near perfectly on the visual axis, those slide things there give rise to some kind of an angel wing haze to the patient. So nothing is perfect, but you probably have to look at angle alpha, angle kappa, or look at the angle alpha. And if the angle alpha is too bad, because most often the rexus is centered on the capsular bag, or you try to figure out what you can do. But that's been noticed. So nothing is perfect. So now we digress a little further. So this is just two of my the ultrasound machine that was sitting in my room. We hardly use it because we use the IOL Master 700. But if you look at this one kind of is older than my son by about almost a decade. I bought this about maybe 38, 39 years ago. It still works. You find the screen is terrible. You have to peer carefully. On top, I've had other ones, newer ones come, and this is the third one. Whatever's come new has gone for a toss in 6 or 7 years, and this is still not working well. This still works. Something kept coming back. You look at the name 3M. What is 3M? 3M is Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. These people, 40 years ago, were into ophthalmology. They made this, and they made a phaco machine. The handpiece of the phaco machine was actually plastic. It wasn't metal. And they also made some IOLs. So Nivian is here. Your father bought, I think, Chennai's first 3M machine at that time. That was very popular because at that time there were only 3 companies or 4 selling phaco in India. Opticon, this 3M, and Alcon had just come in, and J&J at that time was Allergan. They were just coming in. So these people actually came in earlier. So quite a few were sold all over. Anyhow, this, for some reason, after some time, the company went out of this business, and the license of both the A-scan and the phaco machine were taken over by Biomedics, who were the dealer in India. And they still make a similar one still and everything. But coming back, we digress there. At that time, they were also making, that means about almost 38 years ago, they had a multifocal lens. When phaco had not yet come, it was ECC with sutures. They had a 6.5 millimeter PMMA single piece lens with rings, 14 rings. And Bandari, who was the owner of Biomedics, had probably bought about 100 or so, and he had brought it in India. And those days, I think it was priced at about 6,000 or 7,000 rupees. When we were doing cataracts for 5,000-6,000 rupees. I mean, when he couldn't sell it, being a good friend, he came to me and said, do something. I will give it to you at 3,000 rupees. You take about 30 of these. Help me. So for some reason, I took it. I started implanting in left, right center of ECC. I suddenly found those lucky ones who had low astigmatism had fantastic near vision. And that was supposed to be multifocal lens. That doesn't end there. When 3M was sold, the lens technology was bought by Pharmacia. Pharmacia continued selling that product as the 6.5 millimeter single piece lens for a short period on the Xeon platform. Then they made this one. This is a monofocal. This is, in my opinion, the best lens ever manufactured in the world. It was silicon, but it had this funny loops. These loops were not circular cross-section, they were rectangular. And the material was such that you can actually knot it, unknot it, it will come back to shape. This was a lens that was way ahead of its times. And they had this in the monofocal, and then they took this, the 14-ring diffractor, that's the diffractor came first, and stuck it on this. So it was available. I've implanted plenty, and if you ever see on a slit lamp any of this kind of loops, watch out, this is that lens, and you'll find none of them had PCO. It's a silicon lens. This is the first lens in the world that had a posterior sharp edge. And in spite of being three-piece, it will never decenter because of the beautiful haptics, the design. An amazing product. And when Pharmacia was taken over by J&J, or at that time Allergan, they stopped manufacturing in Sweden and shifted all manufacturing to the US. And they closed down the Swedish factories, and they couldn't make silicon there, and they started making it in hydrophobic acrylic. And before that, Allergan was making this the array, which was the refractive, and came with the diffractive design. So coming back now, the Technis multifocal that you're implanting is 38-year-old design. Just to put things in perspective. It's a 36-year-old design. And from there, we're still hanging with this kind of a ray separation methodology and trying to do something, putting apodization on that and putting different kinds of rings, 14 rings, 12 rings, 8 rings, and calling something else, what is that, Symphony, it's called, the rings have been renamed. Excellent. I don't know what on earth that means. God only knows what that means. Anyway, finally we're coming down to really advancements of optics eventually after almost 4 decades. So we all along have been having a 4-decade-old technology and thinking it's new. Just to put that in perspective. So summary, all multifocals work. The cheapest one to the most expensive one. Each one of them have got their own unique characteristics. You know that one would focus excellently at, if it is +4 ad or 3.5 ad or 2.75 ad, you know where it's going to focus. So a lot of times I put in the Technis multifocal even today, put in a +4 ad in one eye and 2.75 in the other, and I get intermediate very well for the patient, as long as he says, I don't mind glare and halos. So equal to a trifocal is cheaper. Of course, trifocal works very well too. So advanced EDOF IOLs, again I say that the gold standard today is Synergy, Lisa Tri, Panoptix Pro, Galaxy. They probably are the gold standard yet because they give you excellent visual quality over all distances, but of course they have photic phenomena. The EDOFs are the future, they are there, but they can be used in a large number now, clearly by mentioning to the patient as to what they are sacrificing to get what. So this fills in the gap, so you will have less patients who are unhappy, and your number of multifocals or EDOFs will increase because you're giving them the option, they're picking it up. So a lot of times patients would come to me and say, I don't want a multifocal. I ask them why. I've been told my friend there are glare and halos. No, I have a choice for you. We'll give you this, but you can't read near as well as you'll expect. Quite a few pick this up. That means your multifocal numbers are going to go up, and they're not going to complain when they find that it didn't work as well as they thought it should. So personal experience as they come back, where does this kind of EDOS fit in my practice? It's simply segregating these patients who would now normally turn down a multifocal because they've been reading about it, or they've been told by friends, or been told by somebody else that glare and halos, they can be pushed to this. To a person who takes a multifocal, thinking the glare and halos are going to be tolerable, and then he complains later, you're giving him a choice in the beginning itself, so that he's not going to come back and complain. So that means you have more peaceful sleep and you have more peaceful work. You will not be doing panchayat in the hospital. Often this guy comes, talks to you, then goes back to your optometrist, complains, and then goes to your counselor and says, you never told me this. Now all of that is out. No, I'm very peaceful. So that's main advantage of getting into this scenario. Thank you. I think I put both my talks together, so it's over.
Thank you, sir, for the enlightening talk and a great introduction to PureC. Now, myself and Dr. Vidya will be taking you through a few questions in between these enriching talks. So let's understand the rules of today's quiz. This is going to be a single participant entry, so there's no team formation. And time for each question will be 30 seconds, roughly 30 seconds. Usage of any electronic devices is prohibited. Participants should not interrupt when someone is answering, and whoever wants to answer, kindly volunteer by either raising your hands or, we have Dr. Vidya there. She'll bring the mic to you and you can answer. And please don't answer in chorus. So we have some attractive prizes for each correct answer. Okay, so let's move on to the first question. So after these beautiful talks by Dr. Shikha ma'am and Dr. Kunjal and Dr. Arulmozhi Varman sir, I think these are going to be very simple for you all. So the advantage of elongated focal point in EDOF IOL is all except the first option eliminates overlapping of near and far images, eliminates the halo effect, enhances distance vision, enhances near and intermediate vision. It's open to everybody, so the PGs or the consultants there. Option C, enhances distance vision. Excellent, that's the correct answer. So EDOF IOL, the basic optical principle is creating a single elongated focal point, and by this eliminates the overlapping of far and near images, and it eliminates the halo effect and enhances near and intermediate vision, but at the cost of affecting minimally the distance vision. So the second question, which was the first EDOF IOL introduced into the market?
Ma'am, D. Sorry.
No, that's the wrong question. Anybody else?
Anybody else?
C. Lucidus.
No, again it's wrong. So one more, we'll move on to the answer. So we'll be missing out the prize, so I'm just little. we have a prize for each correct answer. Ma'am, we have the... Oh, yeah, correct. Okay, so let's move on. I'm giving the answer. So it's a symphony. So in June 2014, the first EDOF IOL, the Symphony by J&J, was introduced in the European market, and subsequently it was approved in United States in 2016. So moving on to the third question. What is the IOL which aims at good distance vision while improving the intermediate distance performance without any photopic phenomena? Option A, bifocal IOL, B, EDOF IOL, C, enhanced monofocal, and D, accommodative IOL.
Enhanced.
Maybe you can introduce yourself and answer.
I'm Dr. Brishti Majumdar, Oculoplasty Fellow. My answer would be C, enhanced monofocal.
Very good. So the correct answer is enhanced monofocal. So with the EDOF IOL, the potential drawbacks, we've seen that it's coming with a higher cost, with a reduction of optical performance in low light conditions and maybe a photopic phenomena. So to overcome these, we have the enhanced monofocal, which gives good distance and intermediate vision. So the next question is regarding the AAO Task Force consensus statement for EDOF IOL. All are true except option A, it's a questionnaire called as PROM, Patient Reported Outcome Measure. Option B, provides criteria to evaluate the clinical performance of the IOL. Option C, recommends a minimum of 100 patients in the EDOF group. And option D, the consensus provides recommendation of the defocus curve testing methodology. Come on, we had beautiful talks, and I think we had discussion on this by Dr. SRV ma'am also.
D, ma'am.
No, again, that's not the answer. So it is the except. I mean, the answer is it's a questionnaire. So it's not a questionnaire. AAO Task Force consensus is they give the criteria for EDOF IOLs to evaluate the implant performance under different lighting conditions, and they should include a minimum of 100 patients with a control group of similar group, and the consensus statement also provides recommendations on the defocus curve. And this PROM, which I told, is a questionnaire that is a patient reported outcome measure, which measures the patient's acceptance and impact of the optical side effects of the IOL. So my second last question is about, so in mini monovision, the dominant eye is targeted for distant vision and the non-dominant eye is aimed for intermediate or near vision. So how do you test for ocular dominance? So I'm not giving you any options. I want one of you to say, how do you check for ocular dominance?
Ma'am, like when we're given a paper with a hole, if you ask to see the distance through the hole, whatever eye we use, that is the
Excellent.
dominant.
Yeah, so that's how we test for ocular dominance. So it's a sighting test or sensory test, where in sighting test is a hole in the card test, where you can give a pinhole or hole with a card with a hole, or you can also ask them to hold, clutch your, with the hands, and then ask them to see through it. So whichever eye they are using, that's a dominant eye. Or you can also use the blur test, like plus 1.5 diopter in both the eyes. Whichever eye is more worse, then probably that's the dominant eye. So my last question for today is, the following design of the newer refractive EDOF IOL keeps the dysphotopsia profile comparable with a monofocal IOL, except the option A, the absent rings, option B, abrupt changes in the elevation of steps, C, continuous profile, and option D, smooth change in the curvature of the posterior surface of IOL. I am giving it to Shamika. Dr. Shamika, I think Hussein, you are answered one question, so Shamika.
Ma'am, option B.
Very good. That's a correct option. So the answer is abrupt changes in the elevation of steps. So we had an explanation by Dr. Aramuri Varman sir on this topic. So the advantage of refractive EDOF IOL is a continuous power change, and the posterior surface, they are having a very smooth, they are changing, the elevation is very smoothly over a large distance, which differentiates it from monofocal and multifocal. So thank you so much.
So after this fun-filled session, we move on to another exciting segment where we have our very two senior consultants who will debate regarding for and against EDOFs. I request Dr. Nivedita ma'am to give a talk.
So, good evening, everybody. I thank Dr. Shikha for giving me this opportunity. So, the topic given to me is EDOF will replace monofocal plus as a default premium IOL. I accepted for the talk, but not the statement. So, I have just put a question mark on it to see whether I can accept it. So, there is a definition for EDOF which has been touched upon by the previous speakers. But according to the American National Institute of Standardization, you should have, it is actually quantified. The mean monocular visual acuity at 60 centimeter should be significantly better than monofocals. Monofocals are the controls. You should have a median monocular visual acuity at the same distance, at least better than 6.9 than the controls. You should have an increased depth of focus in the defocus curve, which should be significant. And the last one is, the best corrected distant visual acuity should not be inferior to monofocals. Any IOL that satisfy all of these criteria is labeled as EDOF. This was coined when the first EDOF so-called lens was introduced in the market, which is Symphony, and this was introduced to set a stage for the ratification of that introduction. So anything that does not satisfy this falls into the monofocal plus. It is better than monofocal, but yet not as good as EDOF. So as we just looked out now, the monofocal plus is better than monofocals for intermediate, is equally poor as the monofocals for near, whereas the EDOF is better for intermediate and moderate for poor. So that's the difference. But how does these lenses give that one? Each company comes up with a different terminology. One is stretching and collapsing. That's what the Alcon claim. Other one is a pinhole effect. That is the IC8 Aphthera. The pinhole effect increases the depth of field. The next one is the popular echulet design of the Symphony. Another one says continuous variation in the posterior lens surface. That's the Pure C. We have EDOF center with a refractive optic. Looks smart. We have a refractive blending zone, which gives a gradual change of power across the optic. That is the Synthesis Plus. You have a non-diffractive phase ring technology. This is one more. And then we have a wavefront linking of concentric refractive zones. So each one comes with a fancy terms. We don't decipher this. We have to see how these function. So synonyms of EDOF are extended range of vision, simultaneous vision IOLs, and here monofocal plus are called enhanced monofocals, mini EDOF. So I am giving you a different varieties of lenses which are all hydrophobic, and to me what is very close to the work that I do, will I replace Vivity to enhance, Technis enhance lens is what will we be doing that in Shankanetralaya. So to do that, when we counsel our patients, there are some subjective elements and objective elements that we look at, which is the visual goal, lifestyle, personality, professional and hobbies. In the objective elements, we have comorbidities, prior surgeries and biometry. Let us look at the lifestyle. The more and more patients who are coming and filling the cataract pool are the baby boomers. They have still contribute to the 1/3 of workforce currently. And 1 in 10 of them think they are not going to retire. So their demand is a functional vision with a greater range of vision. Yeah. So to meet and exceed their expectation, you need a holistic approach. Let us look at another objective element, which is the personality. This excellent study looked at the personality of the patients who are coming for cataract surgery, and they were based on the 5-factor inventory scale of personality traits. So out of the 150 eyes of 85 patients who had the different varieties of the lenses, they categorized them based on a questionnaire at 3 months post-op. All of them had good distance, intermediate and near vision without any difference between the groups. What the questionnaire asked them, based on the questionnaire, they judged their individual emotional, cognitive style, behavior type and reaction to surroundings. So they were categorized into extraversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism and openness. So, and the questions they had to answer was the glare they find in their daytime, reading menu cards, how difficult was it, mobile phones, are they comfortable, distance between the vehicles while they're driving. So these are the actual problems that they face once they get into their multifocal modes or the EDOF modes. So how good or bad they judge. The result found that though they have 6/6 and 6 in all the IOLs performed well, people with neuroticism were very critical about their outcome. And many of them said, had I known this, I would not have gone for it. And they all consistently, many of them said that I will not recommend this for others. But people who had this conscientiousness, okay, that's C plus variety. So they were happy about it. They were very content with what they had. And they said they will recommend this to others. So this study tells us, in spite of what we actually see and counsel and deliver the best, how they perceive is going to be totally different from what we are thinking. Now let us look at some objective elements. So this is the perspective health assessment of cataract patients. So one part of it is to look at the ocular surface disease. This is important because as the placido disc distortions and the induced astigmatism because of the ocular surface disease is going to give us a major problem. So dry eye disease. The cataract pool of patients normally have 80% of them in the level 2 or higher grade of dry eye. We know hyperosmolarity of the tear can produce fluctuations in keratometry value, and keratometry is one key investigation that we need to do for good outcome. So if we miss the dry eye pool in our cataract patients, we are going to majorly have different objective refractive surprises and subjective worsening of dry eye symptoms post-operatively. This is just a tip of the iceberg of the problems that we are going to face. On the surface itself, we have many more corneal problems. If you move away from the corneal problems, there are glaucoma issues, macular issues. All of these things is going to complex and make the choice of IOL very complex. Now, these are different studies. This is my second last. These are the different studies which looked out the outcome of different types of the multifocal and EDOF lenses. Some say Symphony is worse. Some say Symphony is better than Atlara. Some in the questionnaires, they say 93% had dysphotopsia. Some say 25% of them had dysphotopsia. So these are different studies. People have looked at different aspects of it. So it is important for us to have a complete knowledge about what we are delivering and accordingly counsel the patients in order to get a good result. So in this scenario, I can only say EDOF will replace monofocal plus if it is affordable to the patient and the patient has a suitable subjective and objective elements to support it. Otherwise, no. Thank you. These are my references.
Thank you, ma'am, for the enriching talk. So now we have the rebuttal by Dr. R.R. Sudhir, Senior Consultant, Cornea and Refractive Services, for the talk, sir, for your talk.
Good evening, everyone. I think we have a lot of basic science which we covered up today. Let us look into this important thing. We'll go back to more basics and see how do we handle this. Is the monofocal plus is for everyone, and EDOF lenses are best reserved for selected patients. And so when we look at this image, this is what we want. Is what do you really want to look at it is to get something called which is called a functional vision. So this is what we need to look at. Everybody unaided vision, which is like use of visual information in the performance of visual related tasks. So what are the things which we need for a functional vision is distance visual acuity of 20 by 30t, which is above the legal limit for driving. So the legal limit for driving is 6 by 12, and recognizing faces in a crowd or at a distance, and intermediate visual acuity of 20 by 32 at 66 centimeter, is able to read comfortably on a laptop or a phone, and reading larger prints at 66 centimeters. This is what the functional visual acuity is. So which are these lenses? Minimum lens which can give you the functional visual acuity. Just for to understand, because we are changing from different visual acuity scales. So this is where we are looking at 20 by 32, which is equal to 6 by 9.5, and on the logmar it is 0.20. And when we measure all these things, we are measuring at we also need to know what is the equivalent of near vision in the logma. So if it is looking at 0.22, all these lenses will be looking whether you are able to achieve a logmar of 0.22 for intermediate vision, and that is equal to something like N12. So just to keep this numbers in mind, and we go back, we look into it. So the standard monofocal IOL currently corrects only the distance vision, depends on spectacles for intermediate and near vision, growing patient expectations in this digital era. Even a vegetable vendor wants for sorting out for any of these activities, they need an intermediate vision. And we had looked into how these lenses work around, what are the principles, We had a spherical lenses, we had aspheric lenses in the evolution, and the spherical aberrations which help. We don't want to correct the entire spherical aberration. There is uncorrected spherical aberration which is helping for intermediate or near vision. So if we had looked here, this paper looked at achieving best visual outcomes with a monofocal intraocular lens. So this is even though the aspheric lens or the monofocal lenses have some amount of negative spherical aberration, the partially uncorrected spherical aberrations are those which are helpful for intermediate vision. And these are advanced monofocal lenses which we have in the market, and there are plenty of them. And we also looked into how these are corrected either by zonal changes or it is sudden change, which can give you the extended intermediate depth of focus. This is a design of a Vivinex Impress, which again in the central 2 mm they try to change, which can give you that range of focus. And there are various steps through which they can be done, like anterior aspheric ramp, posterior aspheric ramp, or Q zone, or a central positive boost, or progressive power gradient. And these are various ways of correcting the trying to give some kind of intermediate vision. So the advantages of enhanced monofocal IOLs, they provide very good visual acuity identical to standard monofocal, plus a reliable intermediate vision up to 680 centimeter. Reduce the required reading ad for everyday tasks such as computer work, tablet use, or viewing a car dashboard. They preserve the optical quality, maintain contrast sensitivity under both photopic and mesopic conditions, matching standard monofocal lenses. They do not increase halos or glare. A photopic phenomena remains at monofocal levels. And very simple way to choose, simplified patient selection. So implantable is almost as easy as any lens. Avoid the complex counseling, need for multifocal or read-off lenses. Patients understand the goal is enhanced functional vision, not full spectacle independence. And low risk of dysphotopsia. And the most important is the economic benefits. Use the same implantable techniques, typically carry a lower premium over the standard monofocal compared with multifocal or read-off options, improving cost effectiveness for many patients. So this is I asked the AI to draw and see and give me what are the things. Like if you look into the 4 different things which we need is to have low dysphotopsia, good near vision, good intermediate vision, good distance vision. There's only natural lens can give that. Whereas we look at the monofocal IOL, again they do not do well with intermediate and near vision. So if we do look for advanced monofocal, they are slightly better than monofocal. So they give a little more of intermediate vision, but not much with the near vision. So how does these monofocal IOLs give you that extra benefit? So they have simple things. There's something called pseudo accommodation, which we can really measure with a push-up test, and that will help us to know whether this patient can do better with why they're able to read well. And there is also depth of focus, which are contributed by the pupil size, corneal multifocality, and ocular aberrations. These are the things through which they are able to have a better depth of focus. And to understand that, we have something called defocus curve. This is a beautiful paper. I recommend all the PGs fellows to go through. And we do for all our new lenses which we are introducing in SN. Many of them at JKCN, we perform the defocus curve for all these patients when they come back for the glass appointment or at 3 months follow-up. So we are currently conducting one of the study where we looking at how good all these lenses are. So to understand more, I think Dr. Arumari sir has actually explained you how the defocus curve is work. It's basically determined by manually placing. So normal visual acuity is traditionally determined by manually placing visual charts at discrete distances, such as 4 meters or near 40 centimeters. However, a similar effect can be achieved by defocusing patients while the visual acuity remain at the fixed distance. So we actually give different lenses which will help you. For example, viewing a distance object with a -1 lens is considered optically equivalent to viewing an object from 1 meter, whereas with 1.5 it is equivalent to viewing an object at 66 centimeters, and with -2.5 it is 40. So these 3 numbers are very, very important to understand the defocus curve. So when we see a defocus curve, so these are various components of a defocus curve. You have the visual acuity on the y-axis. On x-axis, what are the various lenses we have used. So for distance vision, so this gives you the best, the peak at 0 gives you how good is the distance vision. Then as I said, at 1 meter, which is like when you place a -1, it is equivalent to reading something at 1 meter. And for intermediate vision, we have like 1.5. So if you can achieve, what is the functional vision we measured it? We wanted something about 0.2. So if we can achieve that 0.2 at 66 centimeter with 1.5, that means you're able to get a functional vision. And for reading, it is -2.5, as most of these curves drop down, whereas unless until you have a panoptic or synergy lens where you have the tail doesn't drop and it is maintained even for near, that tells you how good is this. So this is how the range of defocus can be subdivided. So you need to set up a target, so above which the patient can perform well. So it is not only restricted to multifocal lenses, it can be done to monofocal also. So this is the range from +0.5 to 0.5 gives the distance, and from -0.5 to -2 tells you about how good they are for intermediate, and -2 to -2.5 tells you about how good they are near. So probably I'll just skip this slide. So we want to look at enhanced monofocal lenses, a retrospective comparative study between 3 different models, and they all have able to achieve the intermediate vision of 0.22. So this is between Eyhance, Impress, and Isopure. And so this is where the defocus curve, all 3 almost merge with each other. We also look, there is again one of the most important study wanted to look at how good is a Clarion lens versus a Eyhance. And here again, if you look at the defocus curve, this tells you that defocus curve from +1 to -3 are not clinically or not statistically different between the Clarion and Eyhance. So only thing is how they marketed and how better they could get Eyhance into it. So this is one. So we did study almost 100 lenses with Clarion, 100 lenses with Eyhance, 50 of Vivinex Impress, and 50 of Vivity, and 50 of Panoptics. So if you see here, this is actually the Clarion and Clarion toric lens. Eyhance is by the green color, and the Vivity is. So Vivity gives you a very good intermediate vision at -1.5, a little more like closer to reading for -2, but whereas the all the monofocal and extended monofocal were not able to get this good. So you get it something like -2 to -3 in this range. So here it is where we added a Vivity and Panoptics comparison. So this is a Vivity, whereas the Panoptics gives you a better vision. We had Vivinex Impress was showing a little better results compared with Eyhance and Clarion. So this were the defocus curves of all the lenses which we had tested. So to go back, the monofocal plus for everyone, they offer reliable, predictable outcomes in eyes with complex anatomy or pathology, where multifocal, trifocal, or EDOF lenses might be contraindicated or less effective. And cost effectiveness and insurance coverage for monofocal and enhanced monofocal IOLs also favor wider applicability, while premium lenses often entail out-of-pocket expenses for all the insurance. So EDOF lenses are reserved for selected patients. They are designated for patients seeking greater spectacle independence at intermediate and some near distances with fewer visual side effects compared to multifocal lenses. Patients must have healthy ocular surfaces, well-controlled astigmatism, and minimal high-order aberrations for best results, as pre-existing corneal or retinal pathology compromises the performance or increases the visual side effects. To conclude, advanced monofocal IOL is as good as is going to be a modern baseline and beautifully bridges the gap between affordability and functionality. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the great overview. So we will be having the closing statement during the panel discussion for this debate. And now let's get back to a few more questions. Over to you, Dr. Vidya.
These questions are all easy peasy. I want the PGs to really answer. Okay. So the aspheric surface of EDOF IOL, all are true except it maintains high resolution over wider range of distances, aims to be pupil independent, optics only diffractive, presence of higher order aberrations, improves depth of focus. Which of these is false? Had you heard the talks? The answer is really easy.
Ma'am, aims to be pupil independent.
No, sorry.
C.
Correct. Optics only refractive in EDOF. Okay. EDOF IOLs are primarily designed to reduce dependency on glasses for which condition? This you don't even have to think, just answer. Within high myopic patients, mixed astigmatism, presbyopia, or none of these.
Presbyopia.
Correct. Good. The next is in EDOF IOLs, a specific amount of controlled optical aberration is incorporated. Which type of aberration is often manipulated? Yeah, can you tell your name, please?
Spherical aberration.
Correct. The type of optical profile used in PureC IOLs, again, this already mentioned earlier, is diffractive, refractive, or what's called diffractive hybrid, or is it only purely refractive, or a single point focus?
Thank you, Vidya, for those interesting questions. So now let's move on to the panel discussion. I invite our chairperson, Dr. Prema Padmanabhan ma'am, and our expert panelists for today, Dr. Sri Priya Krishnamurthy, Dr. Rajesh, Dr. Amala Elizabeth George, and Dr. Vineet Ratra to come forward to join the panel discussion, please. Dr. Kavita Kalaivani ma'am, also please join us for the...
Fine. I think we've had very interesting talks by Dr. Sudhir and Dr. Nivedita. So let's have a poll for how many how many of you think that EDOF is going to be for every eye, and how many think that monofocal plus is giving something extra? So hands for EDOF. Only, sir? Okay. So we've got 5 people here and nobody from there, or you're not going to raise your hand for anything? That side, only Hussein. So I think 6, 7 polls and monofocal plus. Yeah, 2 hands there. So yeah, I think everybody is with monofocal plus right now. So you were talking when, we'll begin with you, Amla. So when you were talking of EDOF, you're talking somewhere in future, or you're talking right now? You think it's there? It's there. We are there.
Caveats, no, the usual caveats are there. We're talking about a normal eye, pupil, everything, and stuff like this. So then, yes, yeah.
No, we're talking about every eye. We're talking about every eye.
And the kind of eyes that we're seeing over here, there's obviously going to have to be some amount of monofocal, maybe monofocal plus.
Monofocal plus. No, the challenge here with the practice, the kind of practice we have at Netralaya, we're seeing every kind of eye. We have specialities. And I'm very grateful that a lot of heads and deputy directors of all the departments are here. So the questions that we want to address here in this update is a great technology of EDOF has been brought by J&J. With the advent of PureC, and we've really scrutinized it. We have the real world data presented by Sir here today. And after going through everything, I would like to know from the panelists that are they open to this technology in a diseased eye? So I think we can begin with Dr. Avius.
Depending on what we consider as a diseased eye, if it's a macular pathology, then I don't think it matters what lens you put. But whereas if it is an early retinopathy or peripheral retinal changes with the central macula preserved, and the patient is a well-controlled diabetic, you can still go ahead with an EDOF lens. Again, there was discussion, it's the patient adaptability to that, because their brain adaptation also does matter to determine how good their quality of the defocus is appreciated by the patient. So if the
How would you, let's
The
say for a
glaucomatous
glaucomatous
eye,
eye,
I guess I wouldn't mind putting an EDOF lens because it's the central vision that's going to be last affected.
so you're open to, so it's an A for glaucomatous eye. You might consider it if the macula
Unless it's a
is.
very advanced glaucoma, the rest of it I will still consider it.
I think we'll also have Dr. Vineet's comments on it. What's your take on Pure C? How do you see it? You think that you would offer it to every patient? If the patient can afford it. We're not considering the cost bit here.
There's not much difference between the eye hands and the POC if you even look at the defocus curve. So, considering the cost as of now without having long term data, I would still stick with a monofocal plus as of now.
So that is for every patient the starting point of the eye. Where do you see Pure C in your practice?
Pure C for now would be for those patients who, so whatever the few Pure C which I have done, they do say that they have good distance vision, and they are though they read better with an ad, they do say that they are able to manage even intermediate, even reading with so I was saying with increased light, they are able to read. So if someone really insists on saying that I want less spectacle dependence, is when I tell them that this option.
You've done bilateral Pure Cs?
Yes.
You've done. So the patients are reading.
I've done 3 of them. They're all good. They don't use glasses, but in testing in the OPD, they say better with ad. But when you ask them, do you really need glasses? They say, no, we are fine. We just need to increase the light.
So you're
One
being
is
a little
Meena's
wary,
sister,
probably.
Meena.
Yeah. So you're being a little like watchful. You want to see a few more results, and then
I didn't
probably
get the lens.
Yeah, and the cost too. Amla, what about uveitic eyes? Are you using eye hands in uveitic eyes?
Eye hands, actually, I've presented the data on eye hands and uveitic eyes. Our in-house data.
So even patients, there's a possibility of CME, macular problems. Your okay, eye hands is delivering.
Yes,
it's almost as good.
about, our patients' eye hands, we're talking about well-controlled uveitis, we have been putting it. So that data I've presented, So we know that it works. See, I'm not really talking about people with wildly difficult pupils. So with the moderate uveitis, we have no objections to putting eye hands.
And will be open.
When your pupil size is a problem. So far, we have never really wanted to put anything which involved a visible zone, either diffractive or vivity when it came to uveitic eyes. Because I'm not certain how it will work out when you have different zones in an eye in which the pupil cannot be relied upon in the long run.
So you have to dilate the pupils with hooks and all, which might not come back to the.
I prefer an eye lens which does not have visible, diffractive zones. So in that case, Pure C is something that we're looking at. Let's see how much of the negative.
So you have presented data on eye hands.
Eye hands. Yeah.
So did it have? So in these eyes where the pupil was, dilated with hooks and all, I'm sure
we took for the purposes of the study, we only took the eyes which were.
So you did not.
We didn't have anterior uveitis and without hooks. Okay. So, but we have been implanting, collecting the data for the other eyes also, and the results are pretty good because they're not really complaining of the kind of dysphotopsia we're talking. These are people who have got other problems also. So
the question here is that with the deform, but you said that those pupils were not taken. I just wanted to know whether the eye hands had that intermediate advantage where the pupil was.
Yeah, if the pupil was not a problem, eye hands was fine in the uveitic eyes. But we have implanted it even in eyes in which we have used hooks.
Where it's kind of behaved.
We don't have objections. Good patient satisfaction. So I'm reasonably comfortable about putting eye hands in eyes with. Eyes, we're not talking about widely dilated pupils, but the moderately, if you needed hooks just for a medium-sized pupil, it's okay. Satisfaction is there even with that. So you're not talking about wildly
So
dilated
you're
pupils.
saying, Vineet, that even in a dilated pupil, the Eyehance gives
Independent
that.
of your pupil size.
So that's what I'm
Doesn't
saying.
matter.
So it's even in a dilated pupil, it gives that intermediate and near vision. That's what I don't know. The studies said that, both Eyehance and Pure C lose that advantage, but in clinical. So I was very intrigued by Sir's presentation of data that the MTF in vivo, like the lens has been placed inside the eye and he's used eye tracing to get the MTF values. And it's very interesting that it need not every time, match with what the optical bench study. Have you kind of compared it, sir?
No, I have. You just cannot. Another issue about this is most of the time your point spread function and your MTF in vivo need not correlate with patient satisfaction. You'll have somebody who's got a really bad point spread function who's very happy, vis-a-vis somebody else whose point spread function is perfect, and that person says, I'm not happy with the quality of vision. So all of these are just guidelines. They work more or less on a majority, but they can't be taken to be perfect on every single patient. You can't take the correlation.
And
So
what
there's
about
something more we need to understand.
what about the MTF tested on eye tracing? Does that correlate?
Yes, it does correlate with the quality of vision, but doesn't correlate with the satisfaction of the patient. This is subtly different.
Yeah, so that brings us to, I think, Nivedita's point that it's not
We're
with.
talking about 4 millimeters, 4 to 4.5.
Yeah.
You're not talking about a traumatic midriasis or something.
4.5. I'm talking about
4 to
4.5.
4.5 is mesopic versus cotopic. So in a dark light where the pupil goes to around 4, it is pupil independent, the Eyehance. Doesn't affect your...
No, I wasn't talking about mesopic. I wasn't talking about scotopic pupil. In bright light, if it's 4.5, that's what I was talking about. Basically, a little dilated pupil. So I just wanted to know, sir, you projected the data of MTF of Pure C done on eye tracing. Was it compared with Eyehance or Technis?
Yes, I have.
So
you'll find that the Eyehance is almost the same. There's no difference because there's no quality or drop of quality in vision. But in Technis, the MTF, average MTF would be definitely lower than Pure C or Eyehance. And it will be significantly lower than a monofocal lens.
no, but I mean, like, how does that translate? That it's MTF of Pure C is more than Technis.
But no, I'm talking about Technis multifocal. I'm sorry.
That's what.
Exactly. I'm sorry. To me, Technis is multifocal.
Okay.
For me, monofocal is Eyehance.
Yeah. So Technis multifocal, definitely it is lower. So it was, you found it equally good.
Yes.
So that's very interesting that in vivo studies, that is like if you're doing the same MTF thing with the lens in the eye, it's equal, because the optical bench studies that showed, there was, the quality of vision, the richness of vision which has been described for a simple monofocal or Technis is supposed to be like very superior compared to any of the EDOFs till now that we have, other than, all the lenses.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah.
I'm always comparing with the multifocal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. PP ma'am. Ma'am. Yeah. The mic. Ma'am, what's your take on these IOLs in eyes, especially the EDOF IOLs in eyes which have had LASIK, hyperopic, myopic LASIK? Can we offer, the question is, the patient has a diseased eye, but patient says, no, I'm not going to wear glasses. I want spectacle independence. So our take on what can we offer to give spectacles to diseased eyes, starting with post-LASIK?
I have a lot of comments actually. I don't know where to start, and I don't know how much
Looking
you want to
forward
listen
to each comment now.
No, first, I mean, even before I answer your question,
I want to, I have a comment on your question, which was which lens would you choose for all patients? I think there is no such lens that can fit all patients. We must be very clear that we must understand the patient's needs and expectations. We need to understand the anatomy of the eye, including the pupil diameter, including the other pathologies that the eye may have, and see where this lens fits into entire spectrum of needs as well as expectations. Some lenses may be termed pupil independent, but vision is not independent. Vision changes with the size of the pupil. So you must be cognizant of that. And like Dr. Arumuri showed also in his slides, if you change the pupil diameter, the quality of the image vastly changes. So measuring pupil diameter even before you select a lens, I think is important. And in fact, if Sudhir is not here, but I wish this was incorporated into the EMR, because most of the time in our way of examining, we examine patients with dilated pupils. We talk to the patients after we've seen them with dilated pupils. But I think the pupil diameter is an important parameter to keep in consideration when choosing a lens. It's also very important to assess patients. I know I'm not answering your question yet. But
as a chairperson, you are giving your final comment now itself. We are looking forward to every comment of yours.
I think it's very critical, especially as we move towards premium lenses, that we assess these patients in the correct way. It's not, the olden times it was enough to measure distant visual acuity and near visual acuity with glasses with pinhole. But when we've evolved into these newer lenses, we need to modify our assessment techniques. Even with multifocals, it was enough to measure distant vision, intermediate vision, and near vision. But with extended depth of focus, it's a little different even from multifocal. There are two ways you can measure intermediate vision, for instance. You can keep the chart at 66 centimeters and see what lenses he needs to read 66 centimeters. You can keep the object at a fixed distance and change the lenses, which is what the defocus curve does. The defocus curve gives us much more information than what intermediate distance corrected vision gives you, because it gives you the range, and that's what you're looking for with EDOF lenses. So with EDOF lenses, I would say it's not even enough to measure just intermediate. You need to measure that range. And if you permit me, I can show you some defocus curves.
Yes, ma'am. You've got the slides here?
I've got one slide based on, thank you.
Where's Stephen? Madam, the slide. So probably we need to add this defocus curve for every, at least for premium IOLs and the pupil size. These are the
Pupil
two notes
size
I think we'll...
For assessment.
Madam, go slide it. Would you like to come here?
Yeah. This is a study, this is part of the study that we are doing. And this shows what we call the defocus curve. So, like Dr. Arumuri Varman said, you take, normally we check vision at 6 meters, right? So when you convert that to 4 meters, that's where the defocus curve comes in. You have to make a correction of plus 0.25 first. So whatever the optometrist says, because in all our other rooms, where vision is tested, it's tested at 6 meters. When defocus is done, you have to first add 0.25, and then, like he said, take your best corrected vision as 0, and then measure. Then you start with plus. You start putting the plus lenses at 0.5 difference until you come closer here. Between this and this, it's at 0.25 difference. And then you get these graphs. And I just want to show you that, like he showed, and it's not surprising, that the panoptics and the panoptics, this is panoptics toric. One of them is panoptics toric, the other is panoptics. Yeah, thanks. And then we have all these others. Okay? And as you expect, the near zero or near emmetropia, all of them are crowded. They're all sort of good. But it's, now how do you get this at intermediate? You saw that equation F is equal to 1 by D. 1 by 1.5 is 66 centimeters. 1 by 2.5 is 40. Sorry for my throat. But this is near vision and this is intermediate. So how do you interpret this graph? One way, if you want to compare lenses, is to take, okay, you want to see at intermediate. This is the difference between Vivity, which is an EDOF lens, and a Clarion, which is a monofocal. This is the difference that you get with an EDOF lens. This is the difference you get with near vision between panoptics and a monofocal. Okay? So if you want to compare lenses at intermediate, for instance, or if you had two different...
Ma'am, we can't hear you, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. If you had two different EDOF lenses, you would compare this distance between them at intermediate. Okay, at this time we only have Vivity, but when we get the pure C, we're going to add that as well. So then you'll have an understanding of how one compares with the other. The second thing you can do is to calculate what's called the landing zone. That is, you take, say, 0.2. This is log marv. So you take 0.2 or 0.3 or 0.1, whichever, and see what is the range of vision, or what is the range of dioptric difference that the patient is able to maintain that vision. That is what continuous focus is about. It's not at 3 different points. It is how long can you maintain that vision. So, for instance, in this panoptics, if you take 0.2, it starts from +1 all the way to 2.75 or something. Okay, that is called the landing zone. So one way of comparing lenses is to compare the landing zone of each lens. The third way of interpreting this graph is to calculate the area under the curve. So if you take 0.2 and calculate this entire area, that's another way of interpreting the defocus curve. So defocus curves gives us a lot of information about the true performance of a lens at different distances.
Ma'am, these were for how many patients?
100.
Each of them was for 100.
Each of them was for. No, I think panoptics was 80, something like that. We still not completed it. I think we combined Vivity and Vivity toric. We combined these two. We combined the toric. The other interesting thing here, you see how much better the Eyehance toric is as compared to Eyehance. Why is that? Because a residual refractive error can reduce your quality of it, can reduce your visual performance. And this is something very important. So when you find that a patient has astigmatism, to get the best out of the lens, correct the astigmatism.
How come you
I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know which of them is. Yeah, toric is better. But for some reason, I found that the IHANS toric is doing so much better than the IHANS.
And all these were corrected for distance, planar for distance.
Yeah. These are
They all
corrected.
ended up with planar for distance,
No,
or
no,
you
no,
corrected
no, no,
with
no.
refraction?
Corrected. No. This is the corrected refractive error
And then the
being the
defocus
baseline,
calculation.
and then you do the defocus curve. So distance corrected intermediate, distance corrected near.
Ma'am, one question.
Between Technis and Clarion, you're saying? Yeah, we could do.
And
It's
these
just
were
that this takes
dilated, these were undilated.
undilated.
All of them. They
All of them.
measured pupil size.
Yeah, that's the one limitation of this, is that I did not subdivide them based on pupil size. Pupil size may have had an effect on this, and that may answer Dr. Rumuri's question also, whether the panoptics, whether these lenses have played out differently because of either any difference in pupil size, possibly. The other thing, sorry,
No techness or spheric lenses.
not in this one. In this, I have not done that. But this,
None of them
we're
which
doing,
were.
but this is only still part of the story. Many of these lenses cause a decrease in contrast sensitivity. And we seem to disregard that because we don't measure contrast sensitivity. And it's convenient not to measure contrast sensitivity because it will not be very flattering to the lenses. So, but if a patient has a decreased contrast sensitivity due to any pathology, this is partly answering your question now. If you know that the patient for some reason has a decreased contrast sensitivity, it's probably not good to use, definitely not the multifocal, which reduces contrast. Anything with diffractive design will cause a decrease in contrast sensitivity. Okay, which is why probably the symphony did not take off so well. It was not, patients were not too happy with it. But any of the the lenses with an altered aberrations, which alter the aberrations. This actually, the point that you made was very, very pertinent. We don't, we talk about aspheric lenses causing negative spherical aberration, but we don't even know how much of it is correcting the patient's own native aberrations. So it's a kind of a very rough science. It's not really a very accurate way of correcting a patient's spherical aberration. We think that by putting in a negative spherical aberration, you're compensating for the patient's corneal positive spherical aberration. But if you measure corneal spherical aberration across a population, you will see a huge difference. And that would definitely explain why patients react differently, apart from what Nivedita said, which was a very valid point. Patients' own mentality and personality change their level of satisfaction. But
did you do an eye trace also for all of these patients? Did you measure did you measure the corneal aberrations also in all these patients?
Not, we can measure the no, in this study, no, we haven't.
Probably if we did that, it would give us even...
Yes, that is a subset also that we are doing. Not only that, the lighting conditions, the low contrast visual acuity is again something we don't test. We test Snellen's acuity. By the way, even Snellen's chart is not the best. The ETDRS chart gives you more information than the Snellen's. So we should really be switching to ETDRS. It is a very simple thing to have a Pelly-Robson chart. And if you want to assess truly, differences between lenses, if you want to look deeper into it, then just a simple Pelly-Robson chart will tell you the difference between lenses in terms of low contrast visual acuity. Okay, that gives us a little more indication. So when you're talking about subtle differences between monofocal plus and monofocals, that may bring out some differences.
And ma'am, about the LASIK, Shika's question about the post-LASIK eyes. I mean, there's no objection to putting, IHANS and the other EDOF lenses.
Again, no, with post-LASIK, the centration of the LASIK is important. The centration of the ablation is important. Just as much as pupil is important, how these lenses forgive any decentration in terms of their optical axes, in terms of how they are aligned to the different optical axes, is important. So if it is even a slightly decentered ablation, they would not do well with many of these premier or EDOF lenses.
How do you measure them on eye trace, ma'am? Or just clinically?
The ablation pattern you can see with a tomography.
So you do a tomo for all up.
Yeah. I mean, all patients who have had refractive surgery should have a tomography done before you implant an intraocular lens. It is not just taking your K values.
You do an eye trace for all of them?
Not eye trace. It's the pentacam
tomo
and
and
so many
eye
other
trace,
things.
or
Eye trace is not everything.
But it tells you more or less what the overall spherical aberration is and gives you an idea which...
It does give you an idea, yes.
The eye trace is a very useful instrument.
Yeah.
If you were to take all your patients, that's what we started to do. We get a basic eye trace on a 6 millimeter or dilated pupil. So that will give me the corneal aberrations, and of course, the person has got the cataract that we discounted. The advantage is you have it on 6 mm. You can go back on the software and bring it down to even 2 mm,
Yes.
3 mm, and then you also have recorded the person's scotopic and photopic pupil. So you can later on go back and look at this one.
Yes.
So this is something that we've been doing regularly now, and it's useful.
Yeah.
Very useful.
Yeah. The one thing about the aberrations with eye trace, it makes just a simple subtraction between the total and the corneal to give you the internal. I don't think that's an accurate way of doing it. So, I mean, the point I want to make is that paying attention to astigmatism is very, very important if you want to get the best out of lenses. So I would urge you to use toric lenses wherever you need to get this thing.
What would be your cutoff, ma'am, for toric implantation?
When there's a difference in K of 0.75, definitely more. Definitely.
Kavita, how open are you to these newer lenses in children? I'm like, among the premium lenses, which lenses are being used by pediatric ophtha? I know you do adult cataract too.
In below 8, there is no rule. I think universally, at least most of the centers below 8, because below at 8, we don't even correct emmetropia.
So what do you use?
So we use a monofocal lens, commonly either sensor or not even aspheric is not even used. We use a simple non-aspheric monofocal IOL with the residual hyperopia correction and add correction. So that is below 8 standard. 8 to 12, some centers and some people consider extended monofocal like IHANS. But in our institute, we still are very conservative with respect to children. And all the things that we are talking, right? So most of them do not apply in children because we cannot study them in children. We cannot study their needs the way we can, adults can verbalize and it's easier to correct children for residual hypermetropia, residual astigmatism, because children's eyes are growing and their needs can be changing. And many of them have strabismus associated. So as of now, I don't see a premium IOL which can be considered safe and effective in a child below 12 years of age. Above 12, if there is absolutely no other pathology like some zonular cataracts and maybe EDOF lenses are tried, and above 16, there are people who do multifocal lenses in children.
Yeah. So you said for less than 8, you are giving them a single focus, right? You're giving them a single focus, and that is for which distance in children? You're keeping them myopic, you said.
No,
Right.
hyperopic.
You're keeping
We
them
undercorrect.
hyperopic.
Up to 8, we undercorrect based depending on age.
Achha, the eye is growing.
The eye is growing.
sorry.
So
Yeah.
we have a residual hypermetropia. Above 8, we try to correct them for emmetropia for distance.
So you have any comments on pediatric ophthalmology children? How you're managing?
I do very little pediatric ophthalmology personally, so I can't comment.
Any other questions anyone has? Dr. Rajesh, you are also doing medical retina. So you can also represent the VR department here. So how open is the VR department to the premium IOLs, or for that matter in diabetic retinopathy patients?
Yeah, if a patient doesn't have any maculopathy, and there are, as the people now are more ambulant and working, so there is increasing demand for all multifocal and EDOF. So what I follow is, if there is no maculopathy and patient is diabetic and OCT shows a healthy fovea, then I go ahead with
You go also for a multifocal IOL. If there is no diabetic retinopathy, well-controlled diabetic, patient wants spectacle freedom, we can put a multifocal. But if there is a diabetic maculopathy and patient doesn't want to wear glasses,
then I don't recommend.
how do you manage these patients? Vineet, if anybody wants spectacle freedom.
Go for a monofocal plus, even if you have a macular edema or an ARMD, because then even if you have to give them higher ad, they don't need that 1.5 is lesser.
You also do monovision, right? A little bit mini monovision.
Yes, I do vision, not so much for these macular pathologies like ARMD, diabetic macular edema. Not so much for them. I won't aim at 0. I'll go a little myopic, and I will tell them that you're not good for multifocal. I will do a monofocal. I generally go for an eye hand, a monofocal plus, because their ads become a little lesser.
See, overall, as cataract surgeons, I do adult cataracts as well. See, when we say patient demands, it is actually not, absolute. We can always bring the patient to understand. So it's more chair time. So we don't really need to look for one ideal IOL. We can look for the ideal IOL for that patient for the need. So I don't think
Exactly as
demand
Madam
is a very, how much you can bring the patient, meet some point, both the patient and the ophthalmologist.
Exactly. I think Dr. Nivedita.
I have a question to Sir. He has now undergone Praise Beyond. So when he have to undergo cataract surgery, how is he going to do it?
Yeah, that's actually it's an interesting question. So when a person without presbyon goes for cataract surgery, you do a very careful aberration profile of the cornea. Based on that, you choose the monofocal IOL. Because the cornea is already multifocal, you should not disturb the corneal aberration profile too much. Either increase it too much or reduce it too much. So,
Scleral tunnel?
That's only astigmatism. I'm talking about putting in an aspheric lens. I would probably need a spherical lens if I have my cataract done. Maybe when we look at my corneal aberration, and then I need to keep the total aberrations in the therapeutic zone. So I choose the aberration profile of the lens, monofocal lens, to keep it in place. So I would still get multifocality by going in for a monofocal, appropriately chosen aberration profile monofocal lens. Let's put it a long sentence.
Thank you, sir.
We have Dr. Ronnie also here. He's sitting there. I had missed him. Ronnie, your comments of about premium IOLs in disease EDOF. I'm talking about EDOF. How open your views, Vivity, your experience with Vivity.
I don't use too much Vivity, but if you're looking at the monofocal plus, I'm fairly happy to put them in patients with glaucoma because I find that there's not that much of an impact on contrast. But I'm careful about two things. One is if this patient, I would definitely not put it in a combined surgery where I'm doing glaucoma combined with a cataract because any decentration in any of these lenses can have a significant impact on their visual outcomes. And somebody who's had a trabeculectomy in the past, again, very careful about this because you do tend to see much greater changes in the keratometry over time depending on how much of filtration you get. So I think that's...
So you're still with monofocal plus in diseased eyes. At least that's accepted. Nivin, you glad to have you, back in the auditorium. So what's your go-to lens right now in your practice?
After listening to all the things, there's no one particular go-to lens.
Yes,
The
you've
best
got
thing
your
is
answer
what the
right.
patients need. Is that I think I have learned a lot from all the talks today. So there's nothing more to add on. But the only thing is, like, end of the day, what the patient needs is also one thing in counseling that we have to spend the chat time with. If they're more oriented with close work, near work, and they're not bothered about the halos and glare, I think still trifocal still plays a role because that is the only lens that can give you a bang on near vision. That is reading books. Near vision means I don't mean the phones and tabs. But then if their work is all more outdoors, younger profile, like what we're getting now, I think these EDOF lenses are a big boon. See, any of the EDOF lenses, most of them function in the same way. As Arul sir said, the specificity is what it is reduced, but each one has their own technology and names. Some call it extended range of vision, some call it extended depth of focus. So these are names given by particular companies. So all these lenses are very good, what we have seen and in our studies also. And additionally, yes, for retina patients and glaucoma patients also, it is an additional boon. Before, we didn't have any choice. As you were asked that question, we have to go only with a monofocal, but now we at least have these EDOF lenses. Even if you have a macular edema or RMD, we can go with these EDOF lenses.
Great. Any other question anybody has? Durga, you had a question. Your email, yeah, I know.
So, I have a patient, sir. Actually, one eye patient has had a multifocal IOL, but with photopic phenomena now. Now she is looking forward for the other eye cataract surgery. Which IOL would be the choice for her?
Very difficult question to answer. You can put in, let's say, something like Pure C, which takes away the photic phenomena, but forever she'll be comparing the two eyes and being very unhappy. You put on a monofocal lens, she'll continue to do the same. So this is going to be very difficult if the patient has now resigned to the fate of the dysphotopsia on the other eye, put a similar lens. You have the same problem in both eyes, and the comparison, if she is absolutely against that particular one, then you probably think about explanting that lens all too. That's important.
So if one eye has a monofocal lens, binocularly will the dysphotopsia reduce or it's going to be the same?
You mean if you were to put in a EDOF lens?
This patient has a monofocal in the other eye by chance.
No problem. If you have monofocal in one eye and the patient is desirous of being partly free from glasses, do put in one of the EDOF lenses because that difference is not significant. They don't notice the difference in visual quality. But you have a trifocal in one eye and you have an EDOF in the other eye, they're going to keep looking at the difference in the quality forever.
Any questions from that side? Everything is clear.
Thank you for this, for the enriching discussion. Thank you all the panelists and the speakers.
So as we come to the close of this cataract update, which has evaluated J&J's Pure C EDOF, and I take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made this evening a success, and we extend our gratitude to J&J for their collaboration and continued commitment to clinical education. Thank you, Meena and group. A warm thanks to the technical support team, our multimedia, and our events team, Mrs. Sai. for their efforts behind the scenes in making this event run seamlessly. And finally, a big thank you to all the colleagues, participants, sir, for taking their time out to make this event a grand success. And we hope that this CME will inspire everyone to explore the potential of this new IOL and other EDOF IOLs in enhancing the visual outcomes and for giving the best to our patients. So let's collect here for a group photo. Invite you all.